All right, welcome to the Smart Dialogue series. Today's session, much like the ones before, is rooted in the spirit of collaborative learning. The dialogue series has been created to provide a platform where voices from diverse disciplines, backgrounds, and perspectives converge. It is in this spirit that I welcome Mary Biju, first year PhD student in the Scripps College of Communication at Ohio University. She holds a master's degree in development studies from Azim Premji University in India and a master's in nonprofit administration from the University of Notre Dame. Her professional background is rooted in nonprofit work with experience in digital communication and research. And this is a timely and culturally rich research focus. So let's embark on another enlightening journey, and you're welcome to share your screen.
I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Khan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anne Mary. As mentioned in my introduction, I am a first year PhD student in mass communication and media arts and studies department at Ohio University. I want to firstly thank Dr. Khan and his team at the Smart Lab for providing me this opportunity to present my in progress research today as part of the Smart Lab dialogue series. My study is titled Parasocial Bonds and Culture First Marketing, Advertising Wellness Through Health Narratives in Ginny and Georgia. I just got back from Atlanta yesterday after presenting this study as part of the advertising panel for the Popular Culture Association conference. I am looking forward to more engagement and feedback from this presentation as well, and finally integrating everything to take this research forward in the most effective manner. So, I want to talk about or like I want to start by asking you to think about the last time you watched something on TV or on YouTube or anything like that or Netflix, where you watched a TV show that made you feel something strongly, um, or something that you could take with you after watching it. And this could be perhaps something in your day or into a conversation, maybe even in a decision that you made about your own life. So, that experience, that blurring of fiction and personal reality, is at the very heart of what I am going to talk about today. What I am specifically arguing is this. A Netflix drama has quietly become one of the most significant mental health platforms for young women in the United States, and advertisers are beginning to notice that and sometimes even exploit it. My goal today is to show you the early empirical evidence for this claim and explain why it matters beyond the world of fan culture. For those of you who are not familiar with the show or haven't watched it but has been having this on your wish list or your watch list for a long time, I will just give you a brief about this show called Ginny and Georgia. So the show follows largely Ginny Miller, who is a biracial 15-year-old kid who moves to a new town with her young mother, who's whose character is mostly shown as an unpredictable 30-year-old woman, and she hopes to always start to get into a fresh start, as Ginny navigates this friendships her friendships or identity and mental health struggles. And Georgia also is later revealed as a character with a kind of a dark past, and also as somebody who has made morally complicated choices, and these decisions that Georgia has made in her life comes to threaten their lives together. And the series, we can largely characterize it as a coming of age drama with mystery, and it explores a lot of family secrets, trauma, and survival that shapes the lives of this mother and daughter, and also the young child in the family. So, Ginny and Georgia as a TikTok mental health touch point. So let me start with something concrete. And with that, I mean, let's look at the numbers. So, because I think the scale of what is happening here is genuinely striking. There are over 658,000 plus TikTok posts under the hashtag Ginny and Georgia. To put that in perspective, this is definitely not a niche fan community. That is definitely it's more of a content ecosystem that is operating at the scale of public health messaging itself. And critically, these are not just simply fan edits or entertainment reaction videos. So when you scroll through this hashtag alone, you would find something quite different, which is posts about therapy, about anxiety, about self harm recovery, about what it means to be a young woman struggling with their mental health journeys in 2025 and 2026. So, this is quite dynamic. It's happening as we are talking. So, fans are effectively using the show, its characters, its storylines, and its emotional kind of register as a vehicle to process their own experiences. So they are not just consuming the show passively and moving on. They are talking there about the health narratives that they relate with and also recirculating them as their own personal wellness discourse. So this is the core observation that drives this entire research for me. Fictional health narratives, that is stories about therapy, about coping, about mental health or illness, how they are circulating on TikTok in ways that are functionally indistinguishable from mainstream public health messaging. And that has profound implications for how we think about advertising, about media effects, and about the relationship between entertainment and well being as a whole. Which brings me to my research question. I'm asking how do culture first marketing strategies on TikTok leverage parasocial engagement to convert Ginny and Georgia's mental health narratives into wellness oriented consumer behavior? So it's I know it's loaded, but it will slowly make sense. There are three key terms in this question that I want to flag. So, that is culture first marketing, parasocial engagement, and wellness oriented consumer behavior. I will unpack each of these as I go into the theoretical framework slide. But for now, I want to make the case for why this particular show is the right choice for the way I have conceptualized this research. So the numbers again are quite remarkable. In a single week in June 2025, Ginny and Georgia generated 2.9 billion viewing hours, sorry, viewing minutes on Netflix. And this is not for the whole season, right? It's just for 1 week. So 45% of this audience is under 35 years of age, and 56% of this includes women. So these are not just any sort of incidental demographics. They are the precise like audience that the wellness industry most actively targets. So but most significant data point for my argument is that 46% of the Gen Z report having received a formal mental health diagnosis according to a 2025 Harmony Healthcare IT survey of over 1,000 Gen Z Americans. So the show's core themes, right, about anxiety, about depression, self-care, self-harm, therapy, identity, all of this map almost exactly into the lived experience of its primary audience. So that alignment, I see it not as accidental and it shouldn't be something that is lost on marketers. So moving to the theoretical framework. So my theoretical framework brings together three bodies of work, and I want to be clear on why I think all three are required and how each one is insufficient to explain what is happening. So the first is the parasocial relationship theory, and this is a theory that is developed by Horton and Wohl in 1956, and it was substantially also elaborated by Gills in 2002. This framework describes the one-sided emotional bonds that viewers with media figures, including fictional characters, um, so the bonds that is formed with people that we see on media effectively. So this generates genuine emotions such as empathy, identification, and also influences viewers about certain attitudes and also behaviors that they later adopt. So when Ginny, the character, the teenager character, she cries in a therapy session, and the viewers feel that with her, that is not any sort of trivial entertainment kind of consumption, that becomes a form of emotional engagement that has measurable effects on how people think about their own mental health. So, the second is entertainment education theory, or the idea developed by Single and Rogers and theorized by Moyer and Gus. And that narrative and this theory looks at how narrative storytelling can function as health communication. So the EE theory works precisely because it bypasses the psychological resistance that directed health messaging tends to trigger. So you are not being told to go to therapy, right? As in direct health messaging, you are effectively watching someone you care about, that is your character in your show, um, and you later, discover the value of therapy potentially. And you also think about taking up that in your real personal life. So the persuasive mechanism is identification and narrative transportation, and it's not instruction. The third is culture first marketing. So this is developed by Douglas Holt, and it was extended into the digital context by his 2016 Harvard Review piece. In culture first marketing, brands do not advertise at audiences. So what they do instead is they embed themselves into cultural conversations that they find the audiences are having. So when we apply it here, wellness brands do not need to sponsor a show like Ginny and Georgia, but they just need to be present in the aesthetical, edits that are made, or linguistically become part of the comments, or commercially by embedding products in between replies of conversations on the comment section. And this being inside the fan spaces that the show has effectively generated on TikTok. So let's and when you layer, okay, I did miss talking about the further. Okay, when you kind of like layer these three concepts, right? These three frameworks over a case like Ginny and Georgia, you get a remarkably coherent picture. And this is about how AI algorithms on Netflix and TikTok are amplifying mental health storylines. Fans are forming parasocial bonds with characters, and advertisers are also finding ways to embed wellness products into such fan spaces. And entertainment has become simultaneously a vehicle for public health messaging and also for consumer behavior. And this convergence of between like streaming platforms with social media and advertising has effectively made it possible for not just this for no single kind of like a theoretical framework that would explain this phenomenon, but all of this to come together, the relations that we form, which would flow into the idea of entertainment education, and which would later lead to effective consumption as per the culture first marketing kind of idea. And before I get into the method, and findings, I want to spend like a moment reflecting on the algorithmic layer of this phenomenon because it is easy to underestimate how much the technology is doing here. So 80% of all Netflix viewing comes from algorithmic recommendations and not from users searching for specific content. So Netflix has effectively, or I'm talking about every platform here, but the data is specifically for Netflix. The platforms have effectively just asked us to like sit back and relax. I'll just go through your viewing history and just do the labor of like suggesting the next show for you to watch because I know better than you that this is what you would love. So that's what platforms have been doing. And Netflix uses over 76,000 plus micro genres to personalize what each individual user sees, and its recommendation system saves the company over $1 billion annually by reducing subscription cancellation. So there is mostly no chance that you would cancel your Netflix subscription because it's always pushing you things that you like. Um, and you are not fatigued by having to make that decision of, okay, what can I watch next? And the point is that mental health reference or resonance of Ginny and Georgie is not simply a product of the show's quality or cultural timing. It is actively amplified by a recommendation system whose purpose is to serve each viewer the content most likely that they will watch. On TikTok, the dynamics are even more acute. So, based on an internal document revealed through a 2024 Kentucky Attorney General lawsuit and reported by NPR, TikTok's algorithm can place users inside content filter bubbles after just 30 minutes of engagement. And internal TikTok research found that after interacting with accounts tagged under clusters like Pain Hub or Sad Notes, employees dropped into negative content filter bubbles within 20 minutes. The mental health content filter bubble is not a side effect of the algorithm, it is, in a meaningful sense, a product of it. So what we have is two interlocking kind of recommendation systems, Netflix surfacing emotionally resonant content for you and TikTok amplifying fan discourse about that content and creating kind of an incredibly concrete or concentrated environment in which wellness advertising can operate. So this is the infrastructure within which culture first marketing embeds itself. So I also want to briefly note that I have, um uh, yeah, sorry, no, I think I just covered that. The NPR report that had like a lot of, there was some issues in like navigating through that, but yeah, it is also a lawsuit worth looking at the 2024 Kentucky Attorney General lawsuit. Which has even more implications for how we algorithmically view content, especially of the entertainment nature. Um and moving to the method, so this research uses a quantitative content analysis of TikTok posts. I selected TikTok as the primary platform because it has the highest volume of Ginny and Georgia fan content in the form of edits, reactions, mental health testimonies, and because the translation from like parasocial bonds to consumer behavior is most visibly available here. So I'm analyzing posts across four hashtags that I selected. And these are Ginny and Georgia therapy, Ginny and Georgia style, Ginny and Georgia lifestyle, and Ginny and Georgia season 3. That's the latest which came out. And each hashtag gives a different window onto the phenomenon. So therapy is the most explicitly health focused hashtag. Then there is also style and lifestyle, which gives kind of like access to a softer wellness and consumer behavior dimensions to this discourse. And season 3 captures the broader fan discourse around the most recent narratives that are surfacing. So what I did is I coded posts across these four variables. So the health themes cover the explicit mental health content such as anxiety, depression, self-harm therapy, and identity. I had like some terms that I was looking for, and the wellness discourse captures the softer language of self-care. Routines or coping strategies, therapeutic framing that does not necessarily name a diagnosis as such. And parasocial language captures direct address of characters and also emotional identification statements and the blurring of character and viewer experience. And product and brand mentions capture the commercial layer of it. So, this includes fashion, beauty, and wellness product references appearing within the fan content space. I also briefly considered hashtag Ginny and Georgia outfit because this is where the fashion, beauty, wellness element was there, and that could layer with the parasocial language element of it. But I felt out of when within the larger frame of the five hashtags, these four were more specifically targeting my research idea. But going forward, I might also consider that hashtag because it had specifically more mentions of the product and brand mentions. So the I also want to be transparent here. The data collection is still in progress, and what I'm presenting today is quite preliminary. The current sample is manually coded across 60 posts or 15 posts per hashtag, and I will speak to what and I will speak to what that limitation means in the findings and conclusion section. So going to the findings, in my initial sample of 60 manually coded posts, 60 manually coded posts, the frequency results are already telling sort of a coherent story. So the wellness discourse appeared in 50 out of the 60 posts, and that is the majority. That means that substantial margin of posts had the wellness discourse, and nearly every post in this sample engages in some way with therapy or coping or self-care language that is tied directly to the show's narratives. So parasocial language appeared in 43 out of the 60 posts, so roughly around like 7 out of 10 posts had direct mentions of like characters, the emotional identification or the blurring nature of like viewer and character experience. And routine based behavior references to journals, therapy appointments, or self care routines that is inspired by the show. That's what I went for in routine based behavior. This appeared in 37 out of the 60 posts. And this is also significant because it suggests that the show is not merely generating any form of like abstract wellness sentiment. It is generating concrete behavioral intentions and kind of daily practices. And product or brand mentions were appeared in 23 out of the 60 posts. So less frequent compared to the others, but represent roughly around like 4 out of 10 posts. So when we actually scale it in the computational sense, which is what I have as a way forward across all of the 658,000 plus posts, right? With and that considering the full hashtag ecosystem, this also the 23 number will also represent an enormous volume of organically embedded product discourse. And the main finding here is that emotional and wellness dimensions of this fandom is extremely high. So it's far higher than the product dimension. So the asymmetry is actually the most interesting thing that I found in the data, and that leads to my third finding, which I will come to in a moment. So this is also a therapy scene. Some just quoting some of the examples that I came across. So before I go on to like the co-occurrence data, which I will come to. this I will use this to like illustrate what these variables actually look like in practice, because in quantitative content analysis, it can be sometimes flattened, the texture of what is actually this sort of rich material of like the comments and stuff. So this post from the hashtag Ginny and Georgia therapy, it's about a clip showing Ginny and Georgia sitting together with the therapist and having a very, uncomfortable conversation. So this received to 237,000 plus likes. And this is also, again, not a marginal piece of content. This is a post that reached a significant audience. And what is analytically interesting is not the like count, it is what the comments show. So viewers are not simply reacting to the scene as some sort of entertainment only, they are treating it as a realistic kind of guide or as a model of therapy or what it should look like. It's like aspirational kind of therapy because it leads to some effective like sharing of feelings, and then that leading up to something. I'm not revealing too much of the plot. um, so people are talking about what it feels to be heard and what it means to be a young person who is struggling, and also finding the language to express their struggle. So the parasocial empathy is explicit and it's quite strong, and the comments address Ginny directly and express identification with her experience, and in several cases describes the scene as something that helped them understand their own kind of situation. And there is also this example, which I thought was also quite interesting. The stylized hashtag gives us a very different but equally important kind of window into this, fan space. This video edit, which uses fast cuts and emotionally kind of driven editing over Georgia Miller's fashion and beauty choices, illustrate what I call, or I have like named it as aesthetized parasocial framing. And fans are again not treating Georgia's style as just some aesthetic content. They are treating it as aspirational lifestyle guidance. So the comments again construct Georgia, like this character of the mother, as someone whose choices, her appearance, her self presentation, her confidence, all of this represent a form of self care and identity construction that the viewers want to kind of emulate. And this is also the space where things like soft wellness discourse happen most smoothly, and so things like beauty and fashion become proxies of self-care and identity and emotional well-being. And this is also exactly the kind of space where culture first marketing operates most effectively. So for example, a wellness brand, which could be a supplement company, or a skincare line or a journaling app, does not need to again sponsor this sort of a show, but they can slowly place themselves in within these spaces, and they are already kind of doing that. And going to the second finding, which is co-occurrence patterns. So this is about how often two variables appear within the same post, right? So because this is where the pathway from parasocial bonds to consumer behavior, they start becoming more visible in my observation. So the most frequent pairing is parasocial language combined with wellness discourse, and this appeared together in approximately 39 posts. So this is a foundational kind of link in the chain where fans engage emotionally with characters, they also engage with wellness language, and parasocial bonds generate wellness discourse in general. And this is consistent with the entertainment education theory, right? Which would predict this sort of a situation. And the second most frequent pairing is wellness discourse combined with routine based behavior, and it appeared in around 32 posts. When wellness discourse is present, there is a strong tendency for it to extend into statements about daily practice or daily routines and things like that, and what the viewer is going to do differently, or how they are going to structure their self care, or what routines the show has inspired. So, routine combined with product appears in approximately 19 posts, and parasocial language combined with product in was seen in 17 posts. And that drop is where actually the analytically kind of interesting finding comes to me. And what the co-occurrence data generally suggests is kind of like a funnel structure. So where like parasocial bonds generate wellness discourse generates routine behavior, and routine behavior is the point at which product mentions enter. So the pathway from emotional identification to consumer behavior is not direct, or it cannot be looked as direct, and it is kind of mediated by wellness discourse and routine, which serves as the bridge. And this is significant. This is a significant implication for how we think about commercial leverage that the culture first marketing operates, or how culture first marketing operates within such spaces. And the third finding, um, which I think is the most important one, is what I'm calling the parasocial product gap. And in this sample, 43 posts contain parasocial language, but only 17 posts contain parasocial language and product mentions. And there is a gap of like 26 posts there. So this represents a substantial kind of disconnect between emotional engagement and commercial conversion. So this implication is direct. So emotional identification with fictional characters does not automatically convert to consumer behavior. The parasocial bonds create the conditions. So the emotional openness, the lifestyle aspiration, the self-care routines and stuff like that, right? But sometimes something else is also required to bridge the gap between feeling and maybe, being pushed to do something further, like consuming the lifestyle that is being showcased to you. So that is the most commercially kind of significant finding for anyone thinking about wellness marketing strategy, and it is also most theoretical finding for anyone who is thinking about parasocial relations and media effects. So parasocial bonds are powerful. 43 out of 60 posts demonstrate that language in an organic and also like in an unprompted content sample, and that is striking. But their power does not automatically translate into the commercial domain, and that's definitely where the advertisers are looking to like integrate themselves. So what would bridge this gap? And that is a question this research cannot yet answer with a sample of 60 manually coded posts. And it is precisely this question that the computational phase of this research is planning to investigate. And about the future directions, the next phase of this project will go from the manual, it will kind of like let go from this manual content analysis to computational methods. Um, so like I suggested, or like I submitted the abstract for this conference in December when I had no idea about the computational methods that we could use for social media. And as I'm currently studying social media analytics in Dr. Khan's class, this has definitely given me a lot of ideas to like take this research forward to the next stage of computational methods. And scaling would matter a lot, because it would explain more than just pointing out that okay, this parasocial language is present here, but its implications would most effectively come down in that sort of scale. So the fundamental limitation of the current phase is definitely again that I have just 60 posts, but I got a sense of what is happening. um, and it also at this stage it cannot tell us what statistical confidence with statistical confidence on how stable these patterns are. So whether they vary across hashtags or how they can change over time, because as I mentioned, this is quite dynamic. And the show already has announced a next season. So particularly across season 3 release period, we were able to I was also able to like observe that the data spiked sharply during that period in terms of the mental health content. So expanding the data set through automated social media collection will allow for more genuine representation of the analysis across full hashtag ecosystem. So sentiment analysis will move beyond the current sort of like binary coding of like presence or absence of certain variables, and it will also move on to like explain why this would happen from an analysis of the sentiment data. And topic modeling will also surface latent kind of thematic clusters across posts at scale and potentially identify sub communities within the fandom that engage with the show's health narratives in meaningful and different way. And the goal is to move from describing what is present to explaining the mechanisms through which parasocial engagement becomes or fails to become consumer behavior. So that kind of explanatory kind of mechanism will require computational tools that this phase is building towards. So to conclude, let me bring all of this together. The three kind of headline or the main findings from this preliminary study are these. So 50 posts contain wellness discourse, which means that majority of the fan generated content about this show on TikTok is not simply entertainment commentary. It is health and wellness communication and operates organically with at the scale of 658,000 plus posts. So fictional narratives now definitely circulate at the scale of public health messaging, and that is not just a metaphor. It is something that can be empirically observed and also analyzed deeply for different segments of marketing and advertising in particular. And the 26 gap between post gap between parasocial language and parasocial plus product categories tells us that emotional identification has to do something more to maybe convert towards the commercial side. And the initially in my introduction, I had mentioned how advertising is able to mold ways in which we consume, which could be exploitative or which could be quite effective. And this is something that I also had a chance to like talk about in the popular culture conference. So also moving on to like ethical advertising, especially in a scene like the mental health space. So, as of now, parasocial bonds definitely give advertisers some real sort of leverage in the wellness space. So, they create emotional environment that makes wellness products culturally legible and also personally meaningful. And something mediates the journey from the feeling to probably buying something. But also, again, the ethical aspect of it is to be further teased out and worked with. So, what sort of ethical marketing can you do in a space like mental health discourse? So, the broader implication generally for like popular culture studies, because that was my intention kind of preparing for that, the broader theme of the conference too. And for advertising and public health, is that we are in the early stages of something that is genuinely an interesting phenomenon, which is the convergence of like streaming platforms and social media algorithms and wellness advertising, and that being integrated into a system in which entertainment itself functions as health communication. You don't have to do that separately. So Ginny and Georgia did not just set out a public health campaign, but around across the 658,000 plus TikTok posts, 50 out of my 60 sample containing wellness discourse and a Gen Z audience in which nearly half carry mental health diagnosis. This suggests that it has become one itself one form of health communication, whether it meant to do it intentionally or not. So the convergence deserves our critical attention as researchers and health communicators and as people who care about relationships between the stories we tell and the commercial interests that increasingly shape and profit from this sort of scenario. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions or hear from you in terms of comments to my research.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that insightful presentation. The floor is open for questions. Okay, you can unshare your screen.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So I have a question. I'll start. So this is about the parasocial bonds with Ginny and Georgia. And
Yes.
you talked about how they drive consumer behavior, right? When you look at parasocial attachment typically, it weakens when audience tends to perceive when something is not authentic or manipulated, correct?
Yeah.
So did you find any evidence or are you looking forward to finding something that are being marketed through these bonds between within the characters? And if so, did that recognition disrupt or actually deepen the attachment? So it's a question about authenticity, which is so important in brands, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think I little bit alluded to this, but I will go on to like give an example. So, it was very acceptable for audiences to be promoted to about content like therapy and even be suggested to like, oh, this person is a good therapist, and this is where you can find a space that talks about a specific sort of mental health trouble that you're having about self-harm or substance abuse, all of this, because the conversations went again from themes like it traveled more than the themes that the show was showcasing. However, as you mentioned rightly, when you go on to certain brand embedments like a wellness journal, for example, or things that are specific physical products that are embedded within these spaces as just links to like check out this self-care journal. Uh, there was some sort of like pushback saying that this cannot, and quite rightfully so, this rightfully so, that this cannot effectively manage my mental health trouble. And this is the space where advertisers would find it dicey to make, and especially for something like mental health and something that requires effective medical attention, but to just be promoted with some forms of apps or wellness journals and things like that, that is where you would get more of like a negative sentiment or a mixed sort of emotion, because I could see reply threads going on where people would be like, yeah, this is just a push for this product. I have tried this is not effective. Firstly, you need this sort of a mental space to like go through this and effectively use this product. So at this stage, I haven't looked at it deeply, but this is definitely the kind of arena where this would be dicey for marketers and advertisers in general, and that's something I would look actively, especially as the third finding indicate that sort of gap between parasocial bonds and products. I would further tease out with this element.
Very, very nice. That's great to hear, and I think that would give an interesting dimension to your research. I have another question, and that is that centers on ethics in how this is being done. So Ginny and Georgia depict their story depicts mental health struggles that are quite dark, really, like self-harm, depression, trauma. Those are all things that can come in. Now, I have not watched this series, but that I feel interested, and of course you can share more about it. At what point does parasocial identification with a character, in this case, these two characters, who are experiencing these struggles, become psychologically risky for, especially for vulnerable viewers? And does your research have anything to add about that boundary from an ethical perspective?
Yes, so ethics is something that I felt after, leading up to this stage of this research, that I should have considered even more than when I conceptualized this. But I was genuinely just able to like go through further comments and later discover it, especially as I mentioned the fifth hashtag that I kind of partially considered was Ginny and Georgia outfit. So the second example that I gave about the fan edited kind of TikTok post where the mother is, aestheticized and um, as shown as somebody who is taking care of herself, but it is mostly again just kind of pushing for more product embediments and not really like showcasing her persona. It is more going materially than the mental health dialogue actually has to offer. So I think ethics definitely comes into play
Mhm.
in this picture, especially when you're offering things as solutions and not really has just solutions of like just presenting yourself externally versus actually dealing with the kind of conversation that you have internally and you're expressing that out in the public. So there is definitely a risk of like people perceiving this as like, okay, you just need to mimic this person and then you will be able to take care of yourself. So especially if somebody is undergoing serious issues like self-harm and things like that, just that sort of a peripheral intervention, and that too not coming always from people who are not trained to give advice, right? This is peer-to-peer communication that you can see within comments. That is definitely a space where self-harm can be quite like proliferated further. And also when you place products within it, it becomes like a grand kind of like mix mash of advice versus like, oh, I'm seeing all of this aspirational kind of life, but effectively then again probably driving somebody back to the darker kind of space. So
Right.
yes, ethics is definitely
Mhm.
something that I have to further tease out in this
Right.
concept.
Right. And that's the classic issue, especially when you're looking at social media data. When you're doing using employing other kind of methods, of course, when you have to go through the rigorous IRB, those questions are going to come up anyway. Okay, so I have another question, and it's my final question, which is about your data in terms of the wellness-oriented consumer behavior, right? So that's what your focus is. That is often framed as self-care and empowerment, as you also point out. But critics might argue that when you frame something as wellness-oriented, consumer for something benefit for the consumer, it has the potential to frequently individualize what are structural problems, such as treating systematic causes of mental distress as personal deficits requiring personal solutions, right? So you can already see that there's this tension um, within these two things. So did that surface anywhere in your data?
Um, so this is not it I saw this, but I did not this is not part of my 60 post data, but something that I did come across. So as you rightly mentioned, it's burdened on the individual to
Mm-hmm.
be all right, and not really like structurally facilitate things like therapy or, you know, because it's expensive or because it's not accessible for populations. And because I feel the content that I looked at was predominantly of the American audience, so um, I did see comments which point out about how expensive therapy is. I can't afford this. So, and that's when things like Facebook groups or communities like that were suggested. But again, the effect of that, how they play out in within the space of like as a solution kind of suggestion, um, is something that I have made note of, but my data does not reflect that at this point.
All right. Well, any other questions from anyone who's listening to us now, or those questions can come later as well when we post this video. So I'll relate that. So we can wrap up today's enlightening session. I would like to thank all of you for attending and listening to the dialogue series. See you again with another insightful session right here with me. Thank you very much, Anne. That was wonderful. Let's keep connected. All the best and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye bye.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Khan, and everyone who joined. Thank you. And feel free to connect with me to ask any questions or like discuss this further.